Commander Hyunsik stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at the dead planet below. Earth hung in space like a broken toy, covered in twisted metal and strange ruins. His people, the Kailari, had been watching this world for 3,000 years. 3,000 long years of silence. The bridge was quiet except for the soft humming of crystal computers. Hyunsik's blue skin reflected the pale light from the screens around him. His 4 eyes never left the planet below. This was his duty, his burden and his father's burden before him. "Commander," called his aide Jaemin from across the bridge. "Something is happening." Hyunsik turned his tall frame toward the younger Kailari. Jaemin's hands moved quickly over the crystal controls, his face tight with worry. Numbers and symbols flashed across the transparent screens. "What kind of something?" Hyunsik asked, walking closer. "Energy readings from the planet's core. They started an hour ago and they're getting stronger." Jaemin's voice was steady, but Hyunsik could hear the fear underneath. This was what they had been afraid of for centuries. The reason the Kailari kept their ships hidden in the outer darkness, watching and waiting. The reason they never got too close to the dead world below. Hyunsik had read the old records many times. His grandfather had been there when it happened. The humans had been a young species, full of curiosity and hunger for knowledge. They had built great cities and reached for the stars. They had seemed so much like the Kailari themselves. But the humans had found something, or something had found them. "Show me the readings," Hyunsik said. The screens lit up with waves of color and light. Deep beneath Earth's surface, something was stirring. Something that had been sleeping for 800 years was beginning to wake up. "It's the same pattern," Jaemin whispered. "The same energy signature from the old records." Hyunsik felt his blood turn cold. The records spoke of the day the humans had gone silent. One moment their radio signals filled space with music and voices and laughter. The next moment nothing, just empty silence that had lasted for centuries. The Kalari had arrived too late to help. They had found a world transformed, covered in structures that hurt to look at, geometry that shouldn't exist, materials that seemed to bend reality around them, and in the deepest places, they had found warning messages left by the last humans. "Keep it buried," the messages said. "Don't let it wake up, don't let it spread." So the Kalari had stayed, generation after generation of watchers, keeping their vigil in the cold darkness of space, making sure that whatever had killed humanity stayed dead and buried. "Run a full-spectrum analysis," Hyunsik ordered. "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." As Jaemin worked, other crew members gathered around the monitoring stations. The ship's AI, a crystal being called Wisdom of Stars, projected itself near the command chair. The energy patterns match archived data from the final transmission period. Wisdom of Stars reported in its musical voice. "Dimensional resonance is increasing at a rate of 12% per hour." Hyunsik closed his eyes. The humans had called it the Awakening Project. They had thought they were reaching for godhood. Instead, they had reached into something darker than any nightmare. "Commander," Jaemin called out, his voice sharp with alarm. "I'm detecting life signs on the surface." That was impossible. Nothing could live on Earth's surface. The Kalari had tested it many times over the centuries. The air was breathable, the radiation levels normal. But something else made it wrong. Something that made their instruments scream warnings and their minds feel sick. "Are you certain?" Hyunsik asked. "Confirmed. Multiple human life signs. They're moving through the ruins near what used to be Seoul." Hyunsik stared at the planet with new understanding. Humans weren't extinct. They had been hiding, waiting, surviving somewhere deep underground. And now they had returned to the surface at the worst possible time. "They don't know," he said quietly. "They don't know what they're walking into." The energy readings spiked again, stronger than before. Ancient systems were waking up all across the planet, responding to human presence like a key turning in a lock. "Send an immediate message to the Consortium Council," Hyunsik ordered. "Tell them the containment has been breached. The humans have returned to the surface and the old systems are activating." "Should we make contact with the humans?" Jaemin asked. Hyunsik thought about this carefully. For 3,000 years, the Kalari had remained hidden. It was safer, that way. But now everything was changing. Not yet, he decided. But prepare the contact protocols. We may not have a choice soon. On the screens around them, the energy readings continued to climb. Deep beneath Earth's surface, something ancient and terrible was stirring from its long sleep. The humans walking through the ruins above had no idea what they had awakened. Hyun-sik gripped the rail of his command platform and prepared for the worst. The long watch was ending and something far more dangerous was about to begin. Dr. Subin pressed her hand against the cold metal of the blast door. She had dreamed of this moment her entire life, but now that it was here, fear filled her chest, like ice water. Behind her, 23 other members of New Geneva Colony waited in the bright white corridor. The surface readings are stable, reported Tae-ho, checking his scanner for the 100th time. Air is clean, radiation levels normal. It's safe up there. Safe. Subin almost laughed at the word. Nothing about this felt safe. For 800 years, her people had lived deep underground in the colony. 800 years of recycled air, artificial light, and the same metal walls. 800 years of being told the surface world was death. But the colony was dying now. The power systems were failing. The air scrubbers breaking down. They had maybe 50 years left before everything stopped working. They had to go up. Or they would die down here in the dark. Remember the protocols, Subin told her team. Stay together. Don't touch anything we don't recognize. And if I give the signal, we run back here as fast as we can. Young Minho raised his hand. Dr. Subin, what if the stories are true? What if there really are monsters up there? Subin looked at the boy's worried face. Minho was only 19, born in the deep levels where the colony children lived. He had never seen a real sky or felt wind on his face. The monsters are just stories, she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. The surface was damaged in the Great Silence, but that was 8 centuries ago. Whatever happened is long over. The blast door mechanisms groaned as they came to life for the first time in decades. Ancient motors struggled to move the massive steel barrier that had kept humanity safe for so long. Or maybe it had kept them trapped. Systems activating, announced the colony's computer in its calm, emotionless voice. Surface access will be available in 60 seconds. Subin's heart hammered in her chest. She thought about her grandmother, who had told her stories about the old world, cities that touched the sky, flying cars and machines that could think, but also warnings about the day everything went wrong. The Awakening Project, her grandmother had whispered. They reached too far, Subin. They woke up, things that should have stayed asleep. The blast door split open with a deep rumble. Light poured in from above, real sunlight that made Subin's eyes water. A metal staircase led up into the brightness, up to a world that no human had walked in 800 years. Surface access is now available, the computer announced. Colony protocols remain in effect. Return to shelter immediately if contamination is detected. Subin took the first step. Her boots rang against the metal stairs as she climbed toward the light. Behind her, she could hear her team following. 24 people about to become the first humans to breathe surface air in centuries. The staircase ended at another door, this one smaller and already open. Subin stepped through and gasped. She stood in the ruins of what had once been a great city. Broken buildings rose around her like the bones of giants, but these weren't normal ruins. The metal and stone had been twisted into impossible shapes, curved and bent in ways that hurt to look at. Some buildings seemed to fold in on themselves, creating spaces that couldn't exist. This isn't right, Tae-ho whispered beside her. These structures, and they're not following normal physics. Subin walked forward carefully, her team spreading out behind her. The air smelled clean and fresh, but there was something else underneath. Something that made her skin crawl. Look at this, called Yoon-ji from near a collapsed wall. She was pointing at symbols carved deep into the stone. They weren't Korean, or English, or any human language Subin had ever seen. They seemed to move, when she wasn't looking directly at them. Don't touch them, Subin warned. In fact, don't touch anything until we understand what we're dealing with. As they walked deeper into the ruins, Subin noticed something strange. Lights were beginning to flicker in the twisted buildings around them. Faint at first, then brighter, as if their presence was waking something up. Dr. Subin, Minho's voice was tight with fear. The symbols on the buildings, they're glowing now. He was right. All around them, the strange markings were coming to life with a soft blue light. The air itself seemed to hum with energy. Subin's radio crackled to life. The voice of Colony Director Park came through, filled with static. Surface team, we're detecting massive power surges throughout the colony. Every system is activating at once. What's happening up there? Subin looked around at the glowing ruins, at the impossible architecture, at the symbols that seemed to whisper secrets in languages older than humanity. I don't know, she said into her radio. But I think we just turned something on. Behind them, deep in the colony, alarms began to sound. Ancient systems that had been dormant for centuries were coming to life. Warning lights flashed in tunnels that hadn't seen light in 800 years. And high above in the darkness of space, alien ships began to move for the first time in millennia. The moment Subin and her team walked through the ruins, every screen on Commander Hyunsik's ship exploded with light. Alarms screamed through the crystal corridors as energy readings shot off the charts. Impossible, Jae-min gasped, his hands flying over the controls. The entire planetary grid is coming online. Every system, every structure, everything at once. Hyunsik watched in horror as the dead world below began to glow. Massive structures were rising from beneath the ruins, pushing through concrete, and steel like flowers breaking through soil. But these weren't flowers. They were crystalline towers that bent space around themselves, creating shadows where no shadows should exist. How many humans are on the surface? He demanded. 24 life signs, Jae-min reported. They don't know what they've done. On the surface, Subin felt the ground shake beneath her feet. Around her team, the twisted ruins were changing. Metal beams straightened themselves into impossible angles. Broken walls repaired themselves with materials that seemed to flow like liquid, but felt solid to the touch. We need to get back to the colony, Taeho said, his voice shaking. This isn't natural. But Subin couldn't move. She was staring at a building that had just finished rebuilding itself. It stood perfectly whole now, but its windows showed rooms that were bigger inside than the building itself. Through one window, she could see a corridor that stretched into infinity. Through another, a room where gravity seemed to work sideways. Dr. Subin, Minho called from across the street. I found something. The young man was standing in front of what looked like a research facility. Unlike the other buildings, this one appeared normal, human-built, with Korean writing still visible on the walls. Subin hurried over with her team close behind. Inside, emergency power was flickering on. Computer screens lit up one by one, showing files that had been waiting 800 years to be read. Subin's hands trembled as she accessed the main database. Project Awakening, she read aloud. Final report by Dr. Dongwoo Kim, Chief Research Director. The file opened and Subin's grandfather's face appeared on the screen. He looked exhausted, frightened, much older than in the family photos she remembered. If you're watching this, her grandfather's recorded voice said, then humanity has returned to the surface. God help us all, because that means the containment protocols have failed. Subin's team gathered around the screen as the recording continued. We thought we were so smart, Dr. Kim said. We found them in the deep ocean trenches, in caves beneath the mountains, in places where reality was thin. We called them the architects, because they built things, impossible things, beautiful things, things that made us weep just to look at them. The screen showed images that made Subin's eyes water. Structures that existed in more dimensions than human minds could process. Cities that folded space like origami. Beings of pure geometry that moved through reality like swimmers through water. They offered us everything, Dr. Kim continued. Unlimited energy, faster than light travel, technology beyond our wildest dreams. All they wanted in return was permission to reshape our world. To make it more efficient, they said. More beautiful. Subin felt sick as she began to understand. We said yes, her grandfather whispered. We gave them permission, and they started changing everything. The laws of physics, the structure of matter, the way time flows. They turned our cities into masterpieces that no human could live in. They made our oceans into gardens of living crystal. They were making Earth perfect for them and impossible for us. On Hyunsik's ship, the energy readings were climbing past critical levels. The crystalline towers on Earth's surface were growing taller, reaching toward space like fingers trying to grasp the stars. "Commander," Wisdom of Stars announced, "I'm detecting dimensional instability. The barriers between realities are weakening." Hyunsik had read about this in the ancient records. When the architects worked, they didn't just change one world. They changed the space around it, the dimensions that touched it. They turned single planets into doorways that could affect entire star systems. On the surface, Subin watched her grandfather's final message. "We realized our mistake too late," Dr. Kim said. "The architects don't think like us. To them, we're just another material to be reshaped. They were turning us into something else, something that would fit better in their perfect world. Some of us were becoming living equations. Others were turning into geometric patterns that existed in 17 dimensions. The recording showed the last days of the old world, humans fleeing underground as reality itself became hostile to their existence. Scientists working desperately to find a way to stop what they had started. We found a way to put them to sleep," Dr. Kim continued. "A resonance frequency that disrupts their connection to our dimension, but it only works if they stay buried, if no human walks on the surface to wake them up again." Subin looked around at her team, at the glowing ruins, at the impossible structures rising around them. The surface isn't poisoned, she realized. It's a prison, and we just opened the door. Above them, the first cracks began to appear in the sky itself. The sky above Subin began to crack like broken glass. Through the cracks, she could see colors that had no names and spaces that folded in on themselves. The air itself seemed to thicken, making it hard to breathe. "Everyone stay. Close," she shouted to her team as the ground beneath their feet started to shift. The street they stood on was becoming something else, something that existed in more directions than up, down, left, and right. Teho pointed his scanner at the nearest building and screamed. The readings were impossible. The structure was somehow bigger inside than outside, and it was growing larger every second. Windows appeared in walls that had no room for them. Doors opened onto rooms that couldn't exist. "Dr. Subin," Minho's voice was barely a whisper. "Look up." Above them, a massive ship was becoming visible. It had been there all along, hidden from their eyes, but now it shimmered into view like a mirage becoming real. The ship was beautiful and terrible, made of what looked like living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. A beam of light shot down from the ship, and a figure appeared in its glow. Subin had never seen anything like it. The being was tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to glow from within. It had 4 eyes that looked at her with ancient sadness, and when it spoke, its voice was like music. "Dr. Subin of humanity," the being said in perfect Korean. "I am Commander Hyunsik of the Kailari Consortium. We must speak immediately before it is too late." Subin stared at the alien commander. Around them, reality continued to bend and twist as the architects stirred from their long sleep. "You've been watching us," she said, somehow knowing it was true. "For 3,000 years, Hyunsik confirmed. "Your ancestors did something terrible, but they also did something brave. They contained a force that has destroyed 47 worlds across the galaxy. Earth was quarantined to protect everyone, including the humans we thought were extinct." As if summoned by his words, shapes began moving in the twisted buildings around them. The architects were waking up, flowing through walls like water, their geometric forms too complex for human eyes to fully understand. "We need to move," Hyunsik said urgently. "There's a facility nearby where your ancestor Dr. Kim built the original containment systems. If we can reach it before the architects fully awaken, we might be able to stop this." Subin looked at her terrified team. Young Minho was crying, his mind struggling to process the impossible geometry around them. Yunji was staring at her hands. which seemed to be flickering between different dimensions. Taiho's scanner had given up trying to make sense of the readings and was simply displaying error messages. "Follow me," Hyun-sik said. "And whatever you do, don't look directly at the architects. Your minds aren't built to understand what they are." They ran through streets that changed with every step. Buildings flowed like liquid, reforming themselves into shapes that had too many angles or not enough. The sky above them showed glimpses of other worlds, other realities where the architects had already won. Behind them, Subin could hear something that might have been singing, if songs could exist in 17 dimensions at once. The architects were calling to each other, sharing information in ways that made the air itself ring like a bell. "Here," Hyun-sik called, pointing to a building that looked almost normal. "Your grandfather's final laboratory." They burst through the doors just as the street behind them folded in half like a piece of paper. Inside, emergency lights were flashing, and computers were starting up after centuries of sleep. "The containment field is failing," Hyun-sik said, studying the alien symbols on his wrist device. "The architects are interpreting your presence as permission to complete their work. They think humanity has returned to accept their gifts." Subin found her grandfather's personal computer and activated it with shaking hands. Files appeared on the screen, showing the final desperate days when humanity had fought to save their world. "There," she pointed to a schematic. "The resonance, projectors. They create a frequency that forces the architects back into dimensional sleep, but they need human authorization to activate." "Then activate them," Hyun-sik said. Subin stared at the controls. "It's not that simple. Look at the power requirements. The system would drain every power source on the planet. It would make the surface uninhabitable for thousands of years." Through the laboratory windows, they could see the architects moving freely now. One passed by the window, a being of pure mathematics that existed as a living equation. Where it touched the ground, flowers made of light began to grow, beautiful and terrible. "My people can evacuate the humans from the underground colonies," Hyun-sik offered. "The Kalari have worlds where your species could thrive. You don't have to stay here." Subin looked at the activation switch, then at her team. They were the first humans to see the sky in 800 years, and now they might be the last. "If we run," she said slowly, "if we let the architects wake up completely and leave this world, what happens to the rest of the galaxy?" Hyun-sik's 4 eyes grew sad. "They spread, world by world, system by system, until everything is remade in their image." Subin's hand hovered over the switch as the buildings shook around them. The laboratory shook as reality bent around them. Through the cracked windows, Subin could see the architects moving like living mathematics through the twisted streets. One of them, a being made of spinning triangles and impossible curves, pressed itself against the glass. Where it touched, the window became a doorway to somewhere else entirely. "The containment field is at 12%, Hyun-sik reported, his crystal device flashing urgent warnings. "We have minutes before complete dimensional collapse." Subin stared at the activation controls her grandfather had built. Red lights blinked across the panel like angry eyes. Next to the main switch, a handwritten note in her grandfather's careful writing. "For whoever comes after us, this choice should not have to be yours. But it is." "I'm sorry, Dr. Subin," Taeho called from across the room where he was studying another computer. "I found the colony evacuation protocols. There are 47 underground settlements across the planet, almost 2 million people. 2 million. People who had lived their entire lives in metal tunnels and artificial light. People who had never seen stars or felt rain. People who deserved a chance at the surface world their ancestors had lost. My ships can evacuate them all, Hyun-sik said. The Kailari Consortium has colony worlds where humans can build new lives. Clean worlds, safe worlds, far from the architects. Subin's team gathered around her. Minho had stopped crying and was looking at her with something like hope. Yoonji clutched her scanner, which was still trying to make sense of readings that broke every law of physics. Taeho stood ready to follow whatever decision she made. Outside, more architects appeared. They moved through the air like swimmers, their geometric forms casting shadows that existed in dimensions human eyes couldn't see. Where they passed, the ruins of Seoul transformed into crystalline gardens that sang in frequencies beyond human hearing. "They're beautiful," Minho whispered, staring out the window. "I can almost understand what they're trying to build." "Don't look too long," Hyunsik warned. "That's how it starts. They make you want to become part of their creation. 47 worlds have fallen to that desire." Subin accessed her grandfather's final files, video recordings of the last days when humanity had realized their mistake. She saw people changing, becoming living art that could exist in 17 dimensions. She saw cities turned into mathematical poems. She saw beauty that would drive human minds insane. The resonance field won't just put them back to sleep. She read from the technical specifications. It will make the surface permanently hostile to their kind of existence. But the energy cost, the numbers were staggering. Every fusion reactor on the planet, every power cell in every colony, everything humanity had built to keep themselves alive. All of it would be drained to power the containment field. The surface would become a dead zone, she continued reading, uninhabitable for minimum 3,000 years, maybe longer. Through her radio, she could hear voices from the colonies below, colony directors demanding updates, families asking if it was safe to come up, children excited about seeing the sky for the first time. An architect flowed through the wall like it was made of water. This one looked like a flower made of pure mathematics, its petals equations that solved themselves over and over. It moved toward Subin, reaching out with appendages that existed in too many directions. Hyunsik stepped between them, some kind of energy shield flickering around his body. "Decide quickly," he said. "The dimensional barriers are failing." Subin looked at the activation switch again. Such a small thing to carry such a terrible choice. Save humanity by abandoning their world, or save their world by sacrificing their future. "Commander Hyunsik," she said slowly. "In all those worlds the architects consumed, did anyone ever fight them successfully?" "No," he admitted. "Every species either joined them willingly, or was transformed against their will. Humans are the first to develop any kind of resistance." "Resistance? Your minds," he explained. 800 years of living near sleeping architects has changed you, made you partially immune to their mental influence. That's why you can look at them without losing yourselves completely." Subin understood. Humanity's long imprisonment underground hadn't just been survival. It had been evolution. They had become something new, something that could stand against the architects where others had failed. She placed her hand on the activation switch. "Dr. Subin," Taeho said quietly, "what are you doing?" "Making a choice our ancestors should never have had to make," she replied. "But someone has to guard the prison. Someone has to make sure this never spreads to other worlds." She pressed the switch. The resonance field exploded outward from the facility, washing over the planet in waves of pure sound. The architects screamed in harmonies that shattered windows across 3 dimensions. One by one, they faded, forced back into the spaces between realities. The beautiful crystalline structures crumbled to dust. The impossible buildings returned to normal ruins. The sky healed itself, showing ordinary blue instead of fractured realities. But the cost was enormous. Every light in every colony went dark. Power systems died across the planet as their energy was consumed by the containment field. Hyunsik's ship descended through the clearing sky. "The evacuation ships are ready," he said. Subin shook her head. "We're staying. Someone has to watch over this place. Make sure the architects never wake again. And if they do wake somewhere else in the galaxy, you'll need allies who can resist them." She looked at her team, at brave Taeho and young Minho and determined Unji. "We choose to be the guardians." Above them, Kalari ships joined Hyunsik's vessel. 2 species, standing watch together over the prison they had built. Earth became a fortress world protecting the galaxy from what should have stayed buried. In the depths below, the architects slept again, dreaming their mathematical dreams. And humanity stood guard, eternal and stubborn, making sure those dreams never became reality.